The sound of sirens still makes my stomach drop. Even now, months later, when I hear them wailing past my window, I'm back in that moment, standing in front of the courthouse, watching Tom's lawyer frantically gesturing, the police approaching because someone had made a scene. My scene. The woman who'd spent 32 years keeping the peace had finally shattered it into 1,000,000 irreparable pieces. But let me back up. 3 months earlier, I was still sleeping in what I thought was my bed, in what I believed was my house. You need to understand something about the life I had before everything imploded. From the outside, it looked like the American dream, didn't it? A brick colonial in Phoenix, Arizona, with those terracotta tiles Tom insisted on for the roof. A driveway where our SUV sat next to his truck. Neighbors who waved when they walked their dogs past our carefully maintained desert landscaping. I was 58 years old, and I genuinely believed I'd done everything right. Tom worked in commercial real estate. He'd say things like market fluctuations and investment opportunities at dinner parties, and I'd smile and nod, playing the supportive wife. I'd worked too, of course. 26 years as a dental hygienist before my knees gave out and I had to take early retirement. My income had been smaller, sure, but it was steady. It was mine. Or it had been mine. Before I started pouring it into what Tom called our future. The thing about a comfortable life is how it can numb you to the small violations. The first time Tom made a financial decision without consulting me, I told myself it was efficient. He understood money better than I did, right? When he suggested I add my retirement savings to our joint account for easier management, I felt like I was being a team player. And when he started coming home later and later, smelling like perfume that definitely wasn't mine, I convinced myself I was being paranoid. I remember the exact moment I first noticed something was off. It was a Tuesday evening in late September. The Phoenix heat was finally breaking. That brief window when you could actually sit outside without feeling like you were being cooked alive. I'd made Tom's favorite dinner, grilled chicken with that honey mustard glaze he always raved about, roasted vegetables, a salad with pecans and dried cranberries. I set the table with the good plates, the ones we'd gotten as a wedding gift from his aunt. I even put out cloth napkins, folded them the way I'd learned from a YouTube video. I'd spent 3 hours preparing everything, timing it perfectly so it would be ready when he got home at 6:30. 6:30 came and went. I texted him. No response. At 7, I called. Straight to voicemail. By 7:30, the chicken had gone cold, the vegetables had lost their crisp edges, and I was sitting alone at a table set for 2, feeling foolish in a way I couldn't quite articulate. He finally came home at 9:47. I know the exact time because I'd been watching the clock, each minute stretching out like taffy, my anxiety building with every passing second. Was he hurt? Had there been an accident? Should I call the hospitals? "Sorry, babe," he said, breezing through the door with his briefcase and that smell, gardenias and something else, something musky that made my stomach turn. "Got caught up at the office, big deal going through. You know how it is." I didn't know how it was. I'd texted, I'd called. How hard was it to send a 2-second message saying he'd be late? "I made dinner," I said, gesturing to the table, still set. The food now congealed and unappetizing. He glanced at it, barely registering my effort. "Oh, yeah, I grabbed something with the team. Just going to head up and shower. Big day tomorrow." And he was gone, up the stairs, leaving me alone with 2 plates of wasted food and the growing realization that I was becoming invisible in my own life. I know what you're thinking. You're screaming at your screen right now, telling me to wake up. But here's the thing about love, or what I thought was love. It doesn't make you blind. It paralyzes you. It wraps around your throat like a silk scarf, pretty and soft, until suddenly you can't breathe. The woman he brought home, God, I can still see her standing in my kitchen, was named Jennifer. 34 years old, blonde hair that caught the light in a way mine hadn't in decades. She had this laugh, high and crystalline, that seemed to fill every corner of the house. Tom introduced her as his business associate. They were working on a project together. I made them coffee. Can you believe that? I actually stood there in my own kitchen making coffee for my husband and his mistress, while they discussed property values and market trends. My hands shook so badly I spilled grounds all over the counter, and Jennifer, sweet, helpful Jennifer, grabbed a paper towel and cleaned it up for me. "Oh, you're so sweet to make us coffee," she said, her voice dripping with a kindness that felt like condescension. "Tom told me you were a wonderful hostess." He wasn't exaggerating. Tom had been talking about me to her, about my hostessing abilities, not about me as his wife, his partner, the woman he'd promised to love and cherish, just as the person who made good coffee. I watched them sit at my kitchen table, the same table where I'd eaten thousands of meals, where Tom and I had done our taxes every April, where I'd cried when my mother died and he'd held my hand and promised we'd get through it together. Now that table held his laptop and her designer handbag, and an intimacy between them that made the air feel thick and hard to breathe. They leaned close, shoulders touching as they reviewed documents on his screen. She'd laugh at something he said, touching his arm, and he'd smile in a way I hadn't seen in years. Open, delighted, present. "Sarah, you don't mind if we work in here for a couple hours, do you?" Tom asked, not really asking, just informing me of what was going to happen. "No, of course not," I heard myself say. I'll be in the living room if you need anything." I retreated to my own living room like a guest in my own home. I sat on the couch with a book I wasn't reading, listening to their voices rise and fall, punctuated by that laugh of hers. Every so often, I'd hear my name, "Sarah's great about giving me space to work," or "Sarah doesn't really get involved in the business side of things," and each mention felt like another small erasure. That night, Tom didn't come to bed until nearly 3 a.m. I pretended to be asleep, listening to him undress in the dark, the familiar sounds of his routine now foreign and threatening. When he finally slid under the covers, I could smell her perfume on him. Gardenias. I'd always hated gardenias. For weeks, I existed in this strange liminal space. During the day, I'd go through the motions, grocery shopping at the Safeway on Indian School Road, attending my book club at the library, visiting my sister across town. But at night, I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling fan, trying to figure out when exactly I'd become a ghost in my own life. The grocery shopping became its own kind of torture. I'd wander the aisles, picking up things Tom used to like, his favorite barbecue sauce, the expensive crackers he'd snack on while watching football, the specific brand of coffee he preferred. Then I'd remember he wasn't eating dinner at home anymore, wasn't eating breakfast with me, wasn't really eating with me at all. I'd stand there in the middle of the cracker aisle, holding a box of something he'd never eat, and feel tears prick my eyes. Then I'd quickly wipe them away, terrified that someone I knew would see me crying over Carr's table water crackers and put the box back with shaking hands. Book club became unbearable. Every month, we'd meet at the Chola Branch Library, a dozen women sitting in a circle discussing whatever novel we'd selected. But the books always seemed to be about women finding themselves, leaving bad situations, choosing courage over comfort. And I'd sit there, offering opinions on fictional characters while lacking the courage to face my own reality. "I just don't understand why she stayed with him," Margaret would say about whatever long-suffering protagonist we were discussing. After everything he put her through, she should have left years ago. And everyone would nod in agreement, myself included. The irony completely lost on me. Or maybe not lost, maybe just deliberately ignored, because acknowledging it would mean having to act. The family unity thing, that belief I mentioned, it ran deep. My mother had stayed with my father through 3 affairs and a gambling problem that nearly bankrupted them. She used to say, "A family that stays together survives together." I'd internalized that message like gospel. So when Tom's daughter from his first marriage called me crying about her college tuition, and Tom said we couldn't help because money was tight, I withdrew $8,000 from what was left of my private savings. Because that's what you do for family, right? You sacrifice. Jessica's call had come on a Saturday afternoon. She was sobbing so hard I could barely understand her at first. "Sarah, I don't know what to do. They're going to kick me out if I don't pay by next Friday. I called Dad and he said he can't help right now. Something about a bad investment. But I only need $8,000 to stay enrolled. If I have to leave now, I lose the entire semester. All my credits, all my work, everything." Jessica and I had a complicated relationship. When Tom and I first married, she'd been 14 and angry about her parents' divorce. I'd been the easy target for that anger. The new wife, the interloper, the woman who wasn't her mother. But over the years, we'd built something. Not quite a mother-daughter bond, but a genuine affection. I'd helped her study for the SATs, taught her to drive, been there for her high school graduation when her own mother was too drunk to attend. "Jessica, sweetheart, calm down. We'll figure this out," I said, my mind already running through the numbers in my savings account. I'd been so careful with that money, setting aside a little each month even after I retired, building a cushion for emergencies. This was an emergency, wasn't it? "I'll help you," I told her. "I'll transfer the money on Monday." "Oh my God, Sarah, really? Are you sure? I'll pay you back, I swear, as soon as I graduate and get a job." "Don't worry about it. Just focus on your classes." I never told Tom about that withdrawal. Looking back, I think part of me knew that if I said it out loud, I'd have to confront what I was really doing, funding my own irrelevance, proving I was useful, necessary, worth keeping around, buying love in $8,000 increments. Jessica never did pay me back. And 3 months later, when I was sleeping in a shelter, she didn't return my calls. Family unity, it turned out, only mattered when it was convenient. The email was an accident. Truly. Tom had left his laptop open on the kitchen table while he took a shower. I was just going to close it. I swear that's all I intended. But the screen showed his inbox, and there, 3 messages down, was a subject line that made my blood freeze. Final walkthrough, 2847 Saguaro Drive. That was our address. My hands moved before my brain could catch up. I clicked. The email chain went back months. Tom and a realtor named Marcus discussing listing prices, staging recommendations, potential buyers. There were photos of our living room, our bedroom, our backyard, with the fountain I'd chosen for our 25th anniversary. All taken on days when I'd been out visiting my sister, or at my book club, or, God, at the grocery store, buying ingredients for dinners Tom barely touched anymore. The photos were surreal, our living room, professionally lit, with furniture rearranged to look more spacious. Fresh flowers on the mantel, flowers I'd never bought, never arranged. Our bedroom, the bed made with different pillows, the personal photos on my nightstand mysteriously absent. The backyard, the fountain running. Tom always complained about running it because of the water bill. Looking like a resort rather than the place where I'd spent countless evenings reading with a glass of wine. They'd staged our home. While I was out living my life, they'd been in here, transforming our intimate spaces into a marketable product. How many times had this happened? How many showings had there been while I was at the library or visiting my sister? The most recent email, dated just 4 days earlier, congratulated Tom on accepting an offer. $450,000. Close of escrow in 3 weeks. He was selling our house. Not our house, my house. The one my retirement money had helped maintain. The one where I'd raised his daughter during her turbulent teenage years. The one where I'd nursed him through pneumonia, where I'd celebrated every promotion, where I'd built a life I thought was permanent. And he hadn't said a word. I scrolled further back in the email chain, my hand trembling on the trackpad. There was a message from Marcus, the realtor, dated 2 months earlier. "Tom, I know you mentioned wanting to keep this confidential. I've instructed my team to only show the property when you confirm your wife is out. We'll continue to list it as owner-occupied, but available for private viewings. Owner occupied, as if I was just another fixture that came with the property, to be worked around and eventually removed. Another email, this one from Tom to Marcus. Sarah usually visits her sister on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Book club is the second Wednesday of each month from 6 to 8 p.m. I'll let you know about other windows. He'd given them my schedule, had mapped out my life to make it easier to erase me from it. I sat there at that kitchen table for I don't know how long, the laptop screen dimming and brightening as it sensed my minimal movements. The shower turned off upstairs. I heard Tom humming, actually humming, as he dried himself. By the time he came down, I'd closed the laptop and was sitting exactly where he'd left me, hands folded, face carefully neutral. "You okay, babe?" he asked, kissing the top of my head in that absent way he'd developed. "Fine," I heard myself say. "Just tired." "You should take a nap," he said, picking up his laptop without a trace of concern that I might have looked at it. Why would he be concerned? I was Sarah, compliant, trusting Sarah who made coffee for his mistress and asked no questions. "Big showing this afternoon," he continued, slipping the laptop into his briefcase. "Might be late again tonight." "Another showing?" The words were out before I could stop them. He looked at me sharply. "Yeah, commercial property. Why?" "No reason, just, you've had a lot of showings lately. It's a hot market." He kissed my head again, already moving toward the door, already gone even though he was still standing in our kitchen. "Don't wait up." And he left. Just like that. Left me sitting at the table with the knowledge of what he was doing, who he was becoming, or maybe who he'd always been, and I'd been too blind to see. That night marked the beginning of my personal disintegration. Have you ever noticed how self-destruction can be so subtle? It doesn't announce itself with dramatic gestures. It's the small abandonments, the rituals you stop performing. I'd always had this thing, every morning at 7. I'd make myself a cup of Earl Grey tea and sit by the bay window in the living room, watching the sunrise paint the McDowell Mountains pink and gold. It was my moment, my tiny claim to peace before the day began. After I found that email, I stopped. I'd wake up, and instead of going to the window, I'd just lie there staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of what I knew pressing down on my chest. The first morning I didn't make my tea. I told myself it was just because I was tired. The second morning, I told myself I'd do it tomorrow. By the end of the first week, the ritual was dead, and with it, something essential in me had died too. I stopped calling my sister, stopped going to book club. The grocery trips became mechanical. Grab whatever was closest, get out fast, go home to a house that no longer felt like mine. I'd stand in front of the bathroom mirror sometimes, trying to recognize the woman looking back. She had my face, sort of, but her eyes were hollow. When had I developed those dark circles? When had my cheeks gotten so gaunt? My sister, Linda, called me after I missed 2 of our regular Tuesday visits. "Sarah, where have you been? I've been worried sick. Are you okay?" "I'm fine," I said, the lie coming easily now. "Just busy. You know how it is." "Busy with what? You're retired. What could possibly be keeping you so busy that you can't even return my calls?" She was right, of course. I had nothing but time. Time to sit in my house that was being sold out from under me. Time to wait for a husband who was never coming home. Time to dissolve, slowly and quietly, like sugar in water. "I've just been under the weather," I said. "Nothing serious. I'll come by next week." "You promise?" "I promise." But I didn't go the next week, or the week after that. Every time Linda called, I'd let it go to voicemail, then text her some excuse. Eventually, she stopped calling as frequently. I'd successfully isolated myself, and the worst part was that it had been so easy. 3 weeks passed, then 4, then 6. Tom kept up his routine. Work, late nights with Jennifer and the project, perfunctory kisses goodbye. I kept up mine. Silence, observation, slow erasure. I was disappearing. And the most terrifying part was how easy it was, how little resistance my existence offered to its own vanishing. I stopped eating regular meals, forgot to take my blood pressure medication, let the housework pile up until the kitchen sink was full of dishes and the laundry basket overflowed. Tom didn't notice, or if he did, he didn't comment. Maybe he liked it this way, evidence of my incompetence, my inability to keep things together. Evidence that he was right to move on, to plan a future that didn't include me. But here's what saved me, and I still can't quite believe it happened the way it did. I was at the public library on Bethany Home Road, returning books I hadn't actually read, when someone called my name. Not the flat, dismissive way Tom said it anymore, but bright and full of recognition. Sarah? Sarah Mitchell? Oh my God, is that really you? Mary Chen. We'd gone to high school together in Tucson, back when the world was full of possibilities and the future seemed like something you could shape with your bare hands. We'd been close once, in that intense way teenage girls are close, sharing secrets and dreams and fears. Then life happened. College, marriages, distance. I hadn't seen her in 37 years. She looked good. Silver-streaked black hair cut in a sharp bob, bright red glasses, an energy that seemed to crackle around her. She was carrying a stack of books on psychology and elder care, which struck me as odd until she explained she'd recently retired from her career as a social worker specializing in senior services. Sarah Mitchell, she said again, and then she really looked at me. Her smile faltered. Oh, honey, are you okay? Something about that question, the genuine concern in it, the way she really saw me when I'd been invisible for so long, broke something inside me. I felt tears start to well up, and I blinked them back frantically. Not here, not in the library, not in front of someone I hadn't seen in nearly 4 decades. I'm fine, I said automatically. No, you're not. She put her books down on the nearest table and took my arm, gently but firmly. Coffee, right now. We're going to get coffee and you're going to tell me what's going on. Mary, I can't. I have to. You have to what? Sarah, when's the last time you ate a real meal? You look like you've lost 20 pounds. Had I lost 20 pounds? I didn't know. I couldn't remember the last time I'd stepped on a scale, the last time I'd cared about my appearance enough to check. Coffee? She asked, and something in me, some tiny pilot light I thought had gone out completely, flickered back to life. We ended up at a Starbucks, the mid-afternoon crowd thin enough for real conversation. Mary ordered something complicated with oat milk and espresso. I got chamomile tea, couldn't stomach Earl Grey anymore, and found myself for the first time in months actually talking. It all came out. The email, the house, Tom and Jennifer, my drained savings. The way I'd stopped being a person and become a convenient obstacle to be moved around or removed entirely. Mary listened without interrupting, her expression shifting from shock to anger to something that looked like professional assessment. I told her about the staged photos, about Tom giving the realtor my schedule, about making coffee for his mistress. I told her about Jessica and the $8,000 I'd never see again. I told her about the missed dinners, the perfume smell, the way he'd stopped looking at me like I was a person and started looking through me like I was glass. He doesn't even see me anymore, Mary. I'll be standing right there and he'll walk past me like I'm furniture. Sometimes I wonder if I actually died somewhere along the way and nobody told me, like I'm just a ghost haunting my own life. When I finally ran out of words, she reached across the table and took my hand. Her grip was warm and solid, and I realized how long it had been since anyone had touched me with intention. Sarah, she said, I need you to hear something, and I need you to really listen. What you're describing isn't just a bad marriage, it's abuse, financial abuse, emotional abuse, and if he's really selling your house without your knowledge or consent, it's potentially criminal. The word abuse hit me like a slap. Abuse was what happened to other people. Abuse was bruises and broken bones and police reports. Abuse wasn't missing dinners and secret emails and a husband who hummed while planning to destroy your life. No, Mary, you don't understand. He doesn't hit me. He's never even raised his voice. Abuse isn't just physical, Sarah. It's control, it's isolation. It's systematically destroying someone's sense of self-worth until they don't even recognize themselves anymore. She squeezed my hand. Tell me something. When's the last time you did something just for you? When's the last time you felt like you mattered? I'd started crying somewhere in the middle of her words, quiet tears that dripped onto the table between us. She handed me a napkin, then pulled out her phone. I'm going to send you some information, she said. Research, statistics, resources. Because I think you need to understand how serious this is. She paused, her eyes meeting mine. Did you know that in nursing homes, almost 1 in 6 residents reports experiencing some form of abuse? And that's in facilities designed to care for vulnerable adults. Imagine how much higher that number is for seniors living in their own homes with family members. The statistic hit me like a physical blow. 1 in 6. I thought about all the ways I'd normalized Tom's behavior, excused it, accommodated it. How long had I been a statistic without realizing it? Mary wasn't done. And Sarah, the self-neglect you're describing, stopping your routines, isolating yourself, not eating properly. There's research showing that seniors who suffer from severe self-neglect have nearly 6 times the risk of dying within a year compared to those who don't. 6 times. The number echoed in my head. I'd been killing myself, slowly and quietly, to maintain the fiction of family unity. What am I supposed to do? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. I don't know how to. I've been with Tom for 32 years. This house, this life, it's all I know. Who am I without it? You're Sarah Chen, she said firmly. You're the girl who used to sneak into concerts with me using fake IDs. You're the woman who became a dental hygienist because you wanted to help people smile again. You're the person who took care of a stepdaughter who wasn't always grateful for it, because that's who you are, someone who shows up, who cares, who does the work even when it's hard. I'd forgotten that girl, the one who'd snuck into concerts. The memory came flooding back. Mary and I, 17 years old, using fake IDs we'd paid some senior $20 each to make. We'd gone to see the Pretenders at this dive bar in Tucson, squeezed ourselves into the crowd, and danced until we were drenched in sweat and our ears were ringing. We thought we were so cool, I said, half laughing, half crying. Remember how the bouncer looked at your ID and we were sure he was going to bust us? And he just winked and waved us through? He knew, Mary said. He absolutely knew, but he let us in anyway. She squeezed my hand. You were fearless, Sarah. You suggested the concert. You got the fake IDs. You dragged me there even though I was terrified we'd get caught. When did I stop being fearless? You didn't stop. You just redirected that energy into keeping a marriage together that should have ended years ago. But Sarah? That took courage too. Staying, trying, hoping. That's not cowardice. You're not weak for having stayed. You were trying to honor a commitment. There's dignity in that. Even if it was killing me? Even then. But now you have a different choice to make. You can honor that commitment to your own detriment, or you can honor yourself. And Sarah, you deserve to be honored too. When had I lost her? The one who'd chosen a career based on helping others, who'd saved up for dental hygiene school working 2 jobs, who'd graduated top of her class because she was determined to make something of herself. You're also the woman who's being systematically destroyed by someone who's supposed to love you, Mary continued. And you have a choice right now, Sarah. You can keep disappearing until there's nothing left, or you can fight back. I don't know if I have any fight left in me. Then borrow mine until you find yours again. We stayed in that Starbucks until they started putting chairs on tables. Mary gave me her number, made me promise to call her the next day, and hugged me hard enough that I felt something crack open in my chest. Not breaking, but opening, like a door I'd kept sealed for too long. That night, I went home to the house that might not be mine much longer, and I looked at myself in the mirror again. This time, I didn't look away from the hollow-eyed woman staring back. I looked at her directly, and I said out loud, "This ends now." My voice sounded strange in the empty bathroom, foreign, like it belonged to someone else, but I said it again, louder this time. "This ends now." The next morning, I called Mary at 8 a.m. She answered on the first ring, as if she'd been waiting. "I need a lawyer," I said, "and I need to know exactly what my rights are." "Good," Mary said, and I could hear the relief in her voice. "I was hoping you'd call. I've already made some inquiries. There's a lawyer I know, Patricia Alvarez. She specializes in cases like yours. Elder financial abuse, divorce for older adults. She's good, Sarah, really good. And she's tough as nails." Mary had connections from her years in social work. By noon, I had a consultation scheduled with Patricia Alvarez, a family law attorney who specialized in cases involving elder financial abuse. Patricia's office was in a modest building near downtown Phoenix, the walls covered with certificates and commendations. She had kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor that made me feel, for the first time in months, like someone was actually on my side. Her office was nothing like Tom's world of expensive furniture and power plays. It was warm, comfortable. There were photos on her desk, kids, grandkids maybe, and a coffee mug that said, "World's okayest lawyer," that made me smile despite everything. I told her everything. She took notes, occasionally asking clarifying questions. When I finished, she sat back in her chair and looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Sarah, your husband doesn't have the legal right to sell a house you jointly own without your knowledge or consent. Arizona is a community property state. Even if only his name is on the deed, which we'll need to verify, any property acquired during the marriage is generally considered jointly owned. What he's doing isn't just unethical, it's illegal." The word illegal felt like vindication and terror combined. Patricia continued, laying out options, filing for divorce, seeking a temporary restraining order to stop the sale, potentially pressing criminal charges for fraud and financial exploitation. My head spun with possibilities, but underneath the confusion was something new. Something that felt dangerously like hope. "This is going to be hard," Patricia warned me. "Your husband will fight back. His lawyer will try to paint you as unstable, maybe claim you knew about the sale and are having selective memory issues. They might bring up your age, your early retirement, try to suggest cognitive decline. It's a common tactic in these cases, and it's ugly." "So what do? You document everything. Every email, every text message, every financial transaction. You create a timeline. You gather evidence that proves you're competent, aware, and have been systematically excluded from major decisions affecting your life." She leaned forward. "And Sarah, you need to be prepared for your life to get uncomfortable before it gets better. Your husband will not take this lying down." I left her office with a stack of documents to sign and a plan that terrified me. But I also left with something else, a sense that I wasn't crazy, wasn't overreacting, wasn't being the dramatic woman Tom had subtly conditioned me to believe I was. The fight I was about to wage wasn't going to be quick or easy. Patricia warned me about that. Court cases move slowly, especially when they involve property and finances. Tom would fight back. He'd try to paint me as unstable, forgetful, maybe even mentally incompetent. I'd need to be prepared for character assassination. But here's what Tom didn't know. I'd already died a little death in that house with him. I'd already experienced the worst kind of loss, the loss of myself. What else could he possibly take from me that I hadn't already given away? For weeks, I lived a double life. During the day, I was the compliant wife, going through motions, staying out of Tom's way. But at night, after he left for his meetings with Jennifer, I was someone else entirely. I photographed documents, I compiled emails, I created a timeline of every suspicious financial transaction, every unexplained expense, every instance where Tom had made major decisions without my input. The house was full of evidence once I started looking. Bank statements shoved in the back of filing cabinets, showing withdrawals I'd never authorized. Credit card bills for restaurants I'd never been to, jewelry I'd never received. A whole second life, documented and paid for with our joint funds, hidden in plain sight because Tom had been so confident I'd never look. I found receipts for a weekend trip to Sedona, a place Tom had told me he was going for a client meeting. The hotel charge was for a room with a king bed and champagne service. The restaurant receipts showed 2 entrees, 2 desserts, a bottle of wine that cost more than our weekly grocery budget. I photographed everything with my phone, my hands shaking with a mixture of rage and vindication. This was proof. This was evidence. This was the ammunition Patricia said I'd need. Mary came over twice a week, always when Tom was gone. We'd sit at the kitchen table, the same table where I'd discovered that first email, and she'd help me organize evidence. She had this way of taking the chaos of my experience and turning it into something concrete, something actionable. "You're building a case," she'd remind me when I got overwhelmed. "Every piece of paper, every screenshot, every receipt, it all matters." One evening, Mary brought over a printer she'd bought at Costco. "You need physical copies of everything," she said. "Multiple copies, kept in different locations. What if he destroys your phone? What if he deletes the cloud backup?" Her paranoia seemed excessive until it didn't. Until I realized that Tom had already proven himself capable of massive deception. Why wouldn't he try to destroy evidence? We printed for 3 hours that night, page after page of documentation, emails, bank statements, text messages with Jessica about the tuition money, the original real estate listing for our house with the secret showing schedule. We made 3 copies of everything. One stayed with me, hidden in a box in the garage under old Christmas decorations Tom never touched. One went home with Mary. One went to Patricia's office in a sealed envelope. "Better safe than sorry," Mary said, surveying our work with satisfaction. There was one night I almost broke. Tom came home earlier than expected, and I barely had time to shove a folder of bank statements under a couch cushion. He found me in the living room, sitting in the dark, and for a moment I thought he knew, thought he'd somehow sensed the shift in me. "Why aren't the lights on?" he asked, flipping the switch. "Just thinking," I said, and something in my voice must have sounded normal enough because he just shrugged and headed upstairs. My heart hammered for an hour after that. I'd almost been caught, almost blown everything before I was ready. After he went to bed, I retrieved the folder from under the cushion and took it to the garage. My hiding place felt inadequate now, too obvious. What if he found it? What if all of this work was for nothing? I stood in the garage at 1 a.m, surrounded by the accumulated debris of 32 years of marriage, and felt the weight of what I was about to do. I was going to destroy this life, this comfortable, familiar, soul-crushing life, and I was terrified, but I was more terrified of what would happen if I didn't. The confrontation, when it finally came, wasn't dramatic in the way you might imagine. There was no screaming showdown in the living room, no throwing of dishes. Instead, it was digital and cold and absolutely devastating. I'd spent 3 days crafting the email with Patricia's help. Every word had to be precise, legally sound, impossible to misinterpret. We attached copies of the real estate correspondence, the bank statements showing my depleted savings, the deed to the house proving my name should have been on it, documentation of Arizona's community property laws. The subject line was simple. Notice of legal action, Sarah Mitchell versus Thomas Mitchell. I sent it at 2:30 in the afternoon on a Thursday. Tom was at a site visit. I sat at that kitchen table, my finger hovering over the send button for a full minute before finally clicking it. Then I waited. He called 17 minutes later. I let it go to voicemail. He called again. Voicemail. Then came the texts, first confused, then angry, then desperate. I didn't respond to any of them. The voicemails started coming, each one progressively more unhinged. Sarah, what the hell is this email? Call me back. Now. This is insane. You can't just call me back. Sarah, I'm serious. Whatever you think you're doing, stop. We can talk about this like adults. You're being manipulated. Someone's gotten in your head. This isn't you. But it was me. Maybe for the first time in years, this was actually me. At 6:43 p.m., he came home. I was sitting exactly where I'd been when I sent the email. Laptop closed, hands folded, face neutral. The same position I'd held the day I first discovered his plans. What the hell is this? He was waving his phone, his face red in a way I'd rarely seen. It's a legal notice, I said calmly. I filed for divorce and for an injunction to stop the sale of our house. Patricia Alvarez is my attorney. All further communication should go through her. Patricia, you hired a lawyer? Sarah, what are you? This is insane. You're being insane. There it was, the word I'd been expecting. Insane. The trump card of gaslighters everywhere. No, I said, and my voice was steady in a way that surprised even me. I'm being rational for the first time in years. You tried to sell our house without telling me. You've been having an affair. You've systematically drained my savings while building up your own assets, and now there are going to be consequences. He tried multiple tactics that night. Rage first. How dare I embarrass him, ruin his business deals, throw away our marriage. Then pleading, it wasn't what it looked like. Jennifer was just a colleague. The house sale was going to benefit both of us. Then bargaining. We could work this out, go to counseling, start fresh. Sarah, baby, please, you don't understand. The house sale, that money was going to be for both of us. I was planning to tell you, I just wanted to wait until everything was finalized. You know how you get anxious about these things. I was trying to protect you from the stress. By lying to me, by staging our home while I was at book club, by giving a realtor my schedule so you could show our house behind my back. His face changed. The pleading mask slipped, and for just a second, I saw something cold underneath. You went through my email. You left your laptop open. So you invaded my privacy. You snooped. That's what this is about, isn't it? You're angry because you snooped and found something you didn't like. The audacity of it took my breath away. He was selling my house without my knowledge, and I was the one who'd violated trust by looking at an open laptop? I didn't engage with any of it. I'd learned from Patricia that engaging was exactly what he wanted. Every response would be used against me, twisted into evidence of my instability. Instead, I said, I'm staying with a friend tonight. My lawyer will be in touch. And I left. Walked out of that house with a suitcase I'd already packed, got in my car, and drove to Mary's apartment in Tempe. She'd already made up the guest room. As I drove away, I could see Tom in the rearview mirror, standing in the driveway, phone pressed to his ear, calling Jennifer probably, or his own lawyer, trying to figure out how to spin this, how to maintain control of a narrative that was no longer his to control. The legal process was exactly as grueling as Patricia had warned. Tom's lawyer painted me as a vindictive, possibly senile woman trying to steal from her hard-working husband. They brought up my early retirement, implied it was due to cognitive decline rather than physical limitations. They questioned my memory, my judgment, my motives. The first deposition was brutal. Tom's lawyer, a sharp-faced man named Kenneth Bradshaw, treated me like I was on trial for murder. Mrs. Mitchell, you claim you didn't know about the house sale, but isn't it true that your husband discussed his business ventures with you regularly? He talked about work. He never mentioned selling our house. But you admit he talked about work, about real estate transactions, about the market. So it's possible he mentioned this sale, and you simply forgot? I didn't forget. He never told me. Mrs. Mitchell, you're 58 years old, correct? And you retired early due to health issues? My knees, not my brain. But cognitive decline can start well before physical symptoms become obvious. Isn't it possible? Patricia cut him off. Mr. Bradshaw, if you're suggesting my client has dementia, I'd like to see the medical evidence supporting that claim. Otherwise, this is pure speculation and harassment. But Patricia was relentless. She had the documentation I'd gathered, the expert testimony about financial elder abuse, the evidence of Tom's affair and his attempted fraud. Slowly, piece by piece, she dismantled his narrative. She brought in an expert witness, a geriatric psychiatrist, who evaluated me and testified that I showed no signs of cognitive impairment. She presented the timeline Mary and I had created, showing a clear pattern of financial abuse. She had character witnesses, my former co-workers, my book club friends, my sister, all testifying that I was competent, sharp, and had been growing increasingly isolated due to Tom's behavior. The court issued a temporary restraining order stopping the house sale. The buyers backed out, understandably not wanting to be involved in a legal nightmare. Tom lost his $450,000 payday. But that was just the beginning. Discovery revealed things even I hadn't known. A second bank account in Tom's name only, containing over $200,000, much of it traceable to joint funds he'd siphoned off over the years. Credit cards I'd supposedly co-signed for but never seen. A planned timeshare purchase in Jennifer's name that Tom had been going to make using our home equity. Patricia walked me through the discoveries methodically, each one a fresh wound. This account was opened 8 years ago, she said, pointing to bank statements spread across her desk. See these deposits? They match withdrawals from your joint account. 500 here, 1,000 there, 2,000. Small enough not to trigger alarms, but over 8 years it adds up. I traced my finger down the column of numbers, watching my marriage dissolve into debits and credits. $217,000. That's what I was worth to Tom. That's what 32 years of partnership had been reduced to. A number on a balance sheet, stolen incrementally, methodically, over nearly a decade. There's more, Patricia said gently. We found loan documents, 3 separate loans taken out against the house's equity, $250,000 total. What? My voice came out as a whisper. How is that possible? I would have had to sign. That's the thing, Sarah. Your signature is on these documents, but... She pulled out copies of the loan papers. Look at the dates. This one was supposedly signed when you were in California visiting your sister. I have your credit card receipts from that trip, your airline ticket. You were physically in another state when this notary supposedly witnessed you signing. The implications crashed over me like a wave. He forged my signature. Yes, and that's a felony. The notary who allegedly witnessed your signature? She says she doesn't remember this transaction, which isn't surprising since it never happened. We're pursuing charges against her as well. Either she was complicit, or Tom forged her stamp too. More documents, more evidence of a parallel life I'd been funding without knowing. A storage unit rented in the next town over, filled with furniture and artwork Tom had been stockpiling. For the new place, one email to Jennifer read, Sarah won't even notice it's gone. He'd been right. I hadn't noticed. The antique sideboard from the dining room that I'd assumed we'd donated. The painting from the guest room that Tom said he'd taken to be reframed. A set of golf clubs, a flat-screen TV, a leather couch I'd never seen. All sitting in a climate-controlled storage unit, waiting for his new life to begin. There were emails between Tom and Jennifer that made my stomach turn. Not because they were sexual, though some were, but because of how they talked about me. The old ball and chain is getting suspicious, Tom wrote in one. Might need to accelerate the timeline. Jennifer's response? Just tell her you're working late. She believes everything you say. Another exchange from just 2 weeks before I found that first email. Tom. Closing on the house in 3 weeks. Then I'm free. Jennifer. What about Sarah? Tom. What about her? She signed a prenup. She gets nothing. I checked with Kenneth. Except there was no prenup. We'd never signed one. Tom had been lying to Jennifer the same way he'd been lying to me, telling her what she needed to hear to keep her compliant and cooperative. The judge wasn't amused. Neither was the district attorney's office once Patricia referred the case to them. What Tom had done wasn't just civil misconduct. It was criminal fraud, financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult, identity theft for those credit cards I'd never seen. The charges stacked up like dominoes. I remember sitting in the courtroom the day they read out the verdict. Tom had already lost most of his social circle. Word travels fast in Phoenix real estate circles, and nobody wants to work with a man under criminal investigation for defrauding his wife. His business partners had quietly distanced themselves. Even Jennifer had disappeared, apparently less interested in Tom when he came with legal baggage and no windfall profit. He looked smaller somehow, sitting at the defendant's table, diminished. The man who'd once filled our house with his presence, his opinions, his needs. He was just a middle-aged guy in a cheap suit, facing consequences for the first time in his entitled life. The judge ordered restitution, every penny he'd taken from my savings, plus damages. Tom's financial empire, built on shifting sand and other people's trust, collapsed spectacularly. But here's the thing about justice. It doesn't heal you. It holds people accountable, sure. It rights some wrongs. But the scar tissue from emotional abuse doesn't disappear just because the abuser gets punished. I spent 3 weeks in a domestic violence shelter while the legal proceedings played out, unable to return to the house because of the restraining order complexities. 3 weeks sleeping in a narrow bed, sharing a bathroom with women who had stories that made mine look almost quaint. Women with bruises and broken bones, not just broken trust. The shelter was called New Beginnings, which felt both hopeful and impossibly naive. It was a low-slung building in a part of Phoenix I'd never been to, surrounded by a high fence and security cameras. The director, a woman named Carmen, gave me a tour on my first day. Meals are communal, served at 7, noon and 6, she explained. We have a curfew at 9 p.m. No visitors without prior approval. No sharing your location with anyone outside the shelter. These rules might seem strict, but they're for everyone's safety. My room was 8 feet by 10 feet, a twin bed with worn sheets, a small dresser, a window that looked out onto the parking lot. It was the smallest space I'd lived in since college, and it was mine in a way that 3,000-square-foot house had never been. One night, a woman named Teresa, maybe 25 years old with a black eye she wouldn't talk about, sat next to me at dinner. The shelter served donated food, whatever local restaurants or grocery stores couldn't sell. That night it was slightly stale bread and soup from a can. "You got kids?" Teresa asked me. "Stepdaughter," I said. "We're not close anymore." "Yeah, family's complicated." She poked at her soup. "You seem different from most of us here." "Different how?" "Older, put together, like you got your shit figured out." I almost laughed. Put together. Me, the woman who'd let her husband systematically destroy her life while she made him coffee and smiled at his mistress. "I'm just as lost as anyone else here," I told her. "I just hide it better." "My boyfriend, he's the one who did this," Teresa said, gesturing vaguely at her face. "But he says he loves me, says he'll change. You think people can change?" The question hung between us, weighted with all the hope and despair of abuse victims everywhere. Did Tom love me in his way? Had he ever? Could he have changed if I'd stayed, if I'd tried harder, if I'd been different? "I think some people can change," I said carefully. but only if they want to. And if someone's hurting you, really hurting you can't wait around hoping they'll become someone different. You have to protect yourself first. Teresa nodded slowly, touching her black eye with gentle fingers. That's what Carmen says too. Carmen's right. But that wasn't entirely true anymore. Because somewhere in the process of fighting back, of gathering evidence and hiring lawyers and walking out that door, I'd found something I thought I'd lost completely. Myself. Not the old self. That woman was gone, dissolved in Earl Grey tea and broken promises. But a new self. Harder and clearer and less willing to accept crumbs disguised as love. I spent my days at the shelter attending mandatory workshops on financial planning, job skills, trauma recovery. I sat in circles with women half my age, all of us unpacking the ways we'd been taught to accept unacceptable things. There was power in those circles, in the shared recognition that we weren't crazy or stupid or weak. We'd just been systematically broken down by people who were supposed to protect us. The financial planning workshop was taught by a volunteer named Marcus, not the realtor Marcus, thankfully, but a retired accountant with kind eyes and infinite patience. He started each session the same way. Your money is your power. Nobody has the right to take that from you. He taught us how to read credit reports, how to check for fraudulent accounts, how to rebuild credit after financial abuse. I learned that Tom had opened 3 credit cards in my name that I'd never known about. The balances totaled $47,000. Charges for jewelry, expensive dinners, a weekend trip to Cabo that I'd never taken. This is identity theft, Marcus told me, pointing at the printout of my credit report. You can dispute these charges. You should dispute these charges. I filed the paperwork that afternoon, my hand cramping as I filled out form after form, documenting each fraudulent account, each unauthorized charge. It felt like archaeology, excavating the layers of Tom's deception, finding new evidence of betrayal buried beneath old lies. The trauma recovery sessions were harder. They were led by a therapist named Dr. Rashida Williams, a woman in her 40s who'd survived her own abusive marriage. She didn't sugarcoat anything. Trauma lives in your body, she told us during our first session. Even after you leave, even after you're safe, your nervous system is still stuck in survival mode. You'll have flashbacks, panic attacks. You'll flinch at things that didn't used to scare you. This is normal. This is your body trying to protect you from a danger that's already passed. She taught us breathing exercises, grounding techniques, ways to manage the anxiety that would ambush me at unexpected moments. A car door slamming would send my heart racing. The smell of gardenias from a woman's perfume in the grocery store would make me nauseous. Tom's voice, or what I thought was Tom's voice, in a crowd would make me freeze, unable to move until I verified it wasn't actually him. You're not going crazy, Dr. Williams would remind us. You're healing, and healing isn't linear. Some days will be better than others. Some days you'll feel strong and capable. Other days you'll want to curl up and disappear. Both are valid. Both are part of the process. During one session, a woman named Angela, maybe 40 years old with a scar across her collarbone, asked the question we were all thinking. How long does it take to stop feeling like this? To feel normal again? Dr. Williams was quiet for a moment. There's no timeline for healing. And honestly, you might never feel normal in the way you did before, because you're not the same person you were before the abuse. You're someone who survived something terrible. That changes you, but it doesn't have to destroy you. The job skills workshop felt almost absurd at first. I was 58 years old with bad knees and a work history that ended years ago. Who was going to hire me? But the instructor, a woman named Paula, who ran a nonprofit helping abuse survivors find employment, was insistent. You have skills, she told me. 26 years as a dental hygienist? That's patient care, attention to detail, medical knowledge, people skills. You think those aren't valuable? She helped me update my resume, taught me how to explain the employment gap without going into painful details. You took time off for personal reasons. That's all they need to know. If they press, you can say you were a caregiver for a family member. It's not a lie. You were caring for Tom's daughter, managing the household. I didn't end up needing the job search skills. The settlement from the divorce gave me enough to live on, at least for a while. But having an updated resume, knowing I had options, that felt important. It meant I wasn't helpless, wasn't dependent. If my settlement ran out, if something happened to my condo, I could take care of myself. The shelter also had a legal clinic twice a week, where volunteer attorneys offered free advice. I'd already had Patricia, but other women weren't as fortunate. I'd watch them sit with these lawyers, hopeful and terrified, asking questions about restraining orders, custody battles, divorce procedures. One evening, I sat with a woman named Rosa, who spoke limited English. Her lawyer had brought a translator, but I knew enough Spanish from growing up in Tucson to help fill in the gaps. Rosa's husband had taken their 3 kids back to Mexico, telling her if she tried to follow, he'd make sure she never saw them again. "I just want my babies," she sobbed, and I held her hand while the lawyer explained the process for international custody disputes, the months or years it might take, the uncertainty of it all. Watching Rosa's pain, I felt guilty about my own relief. I didn't have young children being kept from me. Jessica was an adult who'd made her own choice to cut me off. It hurt, sure, but it wasn't the same as having your babies taken to another country. The shelter taught me perspective. My suffering was real, my trauma valid, but I wasn't alone in it. Every woman there had her own story, her own scars, some visible, some hidden, and we held each other up in small ways, saving the good donated snacks for each other, offering to braid hair or share makeup, sitting together in silence when words were too hard. The house eventually sold. Not for $450,000, the market had shifted, and the legal cloud over the property had scared off the best offers. We got $372,000. Half went to me, minus legal fees. I walked away with about $160,000. It wasn't the fortune I'd dreamed of when Tom first suggested we buy that house 32 years ago, but it was mine. Unequivocally, legally, irrevocably mine. I used it to buy a small condo in a quiet neighborhood near Camelback Mountain. 700 square feet, 1 bedroom, a balcony that catches the morning sun. The first morning I woke up there, I made myself a cup of Earl Grey tea. I'd reclaimed that ritual and sat on that balcony watching the sky turn impossible shades of coral and gold. For the first time in what felt like forever, I breathed without that weight on my chest. The rebuilding has been slow, quieter than I expected. I don't go to fancy restaurants or take expensive trips. Mostly I just exist in a space that's wholly mine, making choices that affect only me. I adopted a cat from the shelter, an older tabby named Winston who'd been returned twice because he's not affectionate enough. We suit each other perfectly. The day I brought Winston home from the shelter is burned into my memory. The volunteer, a young woman with purple hair and multiple piercings, had been apologetic. "I have to be honest with you," she'd said. "Winston's not a cuddly cat. He won't sit in your lap. He probably won't even let you pick him up. His previous owners returned him because they wanted a cat that would be more interactive." I looked at Winston, this gray tabby with suspicious eyes and a permanent scowl, sitting in the back of his cage like he was judging everyone who passed by. "How long has he been here?" I asked. 3 months this time. He was adopted twice, returned twice. He's 8 years old, which makes him a senior cat. Most people want kittens. She sighed. "If he doesn't get adopted soon, we might have to. We're a no-kill shelter, but our space is limited." "I'll take him," I said, before I'd even consciously decided. The volunteer blinked. "Don't you want to interact with him first? See if you're compatible?" "We're compatible," I said, looking at this grumpy, unwanted, middle-aged cat who'd been returned by people who didn't appreciate him. "Trust me." Winston didn't meow on the ride home, didn't make a sound, just sat in his carrier, stoic and silent, as I drove him to his new life. When I opened the carrier in my condo, he emerged slowly, suspiciously, checking every corner before deeming the space acceptable. That first week, he barely acknowledged me. He'd eat the food I put out, use the litter box, sleep on the windowsill. But he wouldn't come near me, wouldn't respond to my voice. I'd sit on the couch reading, and he'd be across the room, watching me like I was a potential threat. "I'm not going to hurt you," I told him on the 5th day. "And I'm not going to return you because you're not performing affection on demand. You can take all the time you need." On the 7th day, I woke up to find Winston sleeping at the foot of my bed, not touching me, but there, present. It felt like a victory. Now, 3 months later, Winston has his routines and I have mine, and they coexist peacefully. He sleeps at the foot of my bed and demands breakfast at exactly 6:30 every morning. He doesn't care about my past, my mistakes, the years I wasted trying to save something that was never worth saving. He just wants his food on time and occasional head scratches, and that simplicity is healing in ways I can't quite articulate. Sometimes, when I'm sitting on the balcony with my morning tea, Winston will come sit near me, not on me, but near me, and we'll watch the sunrise together in companionable silence. He's teaching me that love doesn't have to be dramatic or demanding. That presence is enough, that you can coexist with someone without losing yourself. The condo itself has become my sanctuary in ways the big house never was. It's small, yes. The bedroom barely fits a queen bed and a dresser. The kitchen is galley style, so narrow I can touch both walls with my arms spread. But it's mine. I painted the walls myself, a warm cream color that catches the morning light. I bought plants from the hardware store and learned how to keep them alive. I hung artwork I actually like, not pieces Tom chose because they went with the decor. There's a print of Georgia O'Keeffe's Red Canna in my bedroom, all bold reds and oranges, unapologetic in its intensity. Tom would have hated it, said it was too much, too loud. I love it. I've started cooking again, really cooking, not just heating up meals to serve someone who won't appreciate them. I make myself elaborate breakfasts, omelets with vegetables, homemade pancakes, French toast with real vanilla. I take my time, listening to NPR, sipping coffee, enjoying the process. Last week, I made Tom's favorite dish, that honey mustard chicken, and I ate it alone on my balcony, watching the sunset. It tasted different than I remembered. Better, actually. Maybe because I was eating it for myself, not for his approval. I've also started going to a support group for survivors of financial abuse. It meets every Thursday evening at a community center near my condo. There are usually 8 to 10 people there, mostly women, but a few men too. We sit in a circle and share our stories, our struggles, our small victories. There's Margaret, whose son drained her retirement account while claiming he was investing it for her. There's David, whose wife took out loans in his name and disappeared, leaving him with $200,000 in debt. There's Yolanda, whose husband controlled every penny, making her ask permission to buy groceries, scrutinizing every receipt. Hearing their stories makes me feel less alone, less stupid. Because financial abuse happens to smart people, successful people, people who should have known better. It happens because we trust the people we love, and abusers exploit that trust with surgical precision. The group leader, a counselor named Beth, always ends our sessions the same way. What's one thing you did this week just for you? One choice you made that was yours alone? The answers vary. Someone bought a coffee at a fancy coffee shop without feeling guilty. Someone went to a movie they wanted to see. Someone said no to a family member's request for money. Last week, my answer was, I adopted a cat. The group erupted in applause like I'd announced something monumental. And maybe I had. Because choosing to bring Winston into my life, to take responsibility for another living thing, to open myself up to caring for something again, that felt huge. That felt like faith in the future. "What's the cat's name?" Beth asked. "Winston. He's a grumpy old tabby who doesn't like being petted." "Sounds perfect for you," Margaret said, smiling. And she was right. He was perfect. Perfectly imperfect, just like me. I've reconnected with my sister, though it took time to explain where I'd been, what I'd been through. She cried when I told her everything, angry at herself for not seeing the signs. But I didn't see them either. Not really, not until I was drowning in them. Linda came to visit my new condo the week after I moved in. She walked through the small space, taking in the second-hand furniture I'd bought at estate sales, the single bedroom, the balcony barely big enough for 2 chairs. "It's perfect," she said, and started crying. "Lynn, what's wrong? I'm just so proud of you. And so angry at myself for not pushing harder when you stopped coming around." I knew something was wrong, Sarah. I knew it, and I told myself you were just busy. "It wasn't your fault." "I know, but I still wish I'd been there sooner. I wish I'd been your Mary." "You're here now. That's what matters." Mary and I have lunch every week. She's become more than a friend. She's a mirror, reflecting back the person I'm becoming rather than the person I was. We talk about books, politics, her work with elder advocacy. Sometimes we talk about Tom, but less and less. He's becoming irrelevant to my story, just a chapter I survived rather than the defining narrative of my life. Last week, over Vietnamese food at a place near Mary's apartment, she told me she's been using my case, anonymized of course, in training workshops for social workers. "You're helping people, Sarah," she said. "Your story, what you went through, and how you fought back. It's teaching other professionals to recognize the signs, to take financial abuse seriously." The thought that my pain might prevent someone else's was both comforting and devastating. How many other women were out there right now, making coffee for their husbands' mistresses, watching their savings disappear, disappearing themselves? Before I close this story, I need you to understand something crucial, something I've learned through experience and through Mary's expertise and through my own painful research. Emotional and financial abuse in intimate partner relationships, especially involving older adults, is devastatingly common and devastatingly misunderstood. We tend to think of abuse in terms of visible violence, bruises, broken bones, emergency room visits. But some of the most destructive abuse leaves no physical marks at all. Financial exploitation is one of the most underreported forms of elder abuse. Victims often don't report it because they're embarrassed, because they don't realize it's a crime, or because the perpetrator is someone they love. When your abuser is your spouse, the person you've built a life with, the cognitive dissonance is overwhelming. You make excuses. You rationalize. You convince yourself it's your fault for not understanding their financial decisions, or being too suspicious, or not being supportive enough. But here's what I need you to know. If someone is making major financial decisions that affect you without your knowledge or consent, that's a red flag. If you're being pressured to hand over control of your assets, your retirement funds, your property, that's a red flag. If you're being isolated from friends and family who might question these arrangements, that's a red flag. If you're being told you're too old, too forgetful, too emotional to understand financial matters, that's a red flag. The physical and mental health consequences of prolonged emotional abuse are real and severe. Depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder, physical symptoms like chronic pain, digestive issues, weakened immune system. The self-neglect I experienced, stopping my morning ritual, withdrawing from social connections, not caring for my basic needs. These weren't character flaws. They were symptoms of trauma. And here's the statistic that still haunts me. Research shows that victims of elder financial abuse have a 300% higher risk of early death compared to seniors who aren't being exploited. 300%. The stress, the shame, the isolation, it literally shortens your life. I think about that statistic sometimes, late at night when I can't sleep. I think about how close I came to being one of those statistics. If Mary hadn't called my name in that library, if I hadn't had that one moment of connection that reminded me I was still a person worth saving, where would I be now? Probably still in that house, still disappearing, still killing myself slowly to maintain the fiction of family unity. Or maybe I'd already be gone. Another nameless statistic in a research paper about elder abuse. Another cautionary tale nobody would hear. So what can you do, whether you're experiencing this yourself or you suspect someone you know is being abused? First, document everything. Every financial transaction, every conversation, every instance where you feel something is wrong. I know it feels paranoid. I know it feels like you're betraying your relationship. But documentation is power when you finally decide to act. Keep copies in multiple places, physical and digital. Don't rely on just your phone or just your computer. What if your abuser destroys it or takes it away? I had copies of my evidence in 3 different locations, and that redundancy saved me. Second, reach out to someone you trust outside the situation. For me, that was Mary, but it could be a friend, a sibling, a former colleague. Someone who can offer perspective when you're too close to see clearly. This is crucial. The isolation is part of the abuse. Your abuser wants you cut off from outside perspectives, from people who might point out that what's happening isn't normal, isn't okay. Reaching out feels like betrayal, but it's actually survival. Third, know your legal rights. Community property states like Arizona have specific protections for spouses in cases of hidden assets or fraudulent transfers. An elder law attorney can help you understand what you're entitled to and how to protect it. Many lawyers offer free consultations. Patricia met with me for an hour before I ever signed a retainer agreement, and she helped me understand my options without pressuring me to hire her. Good lawyers exist, and they understand that asking for help is terrifying. Fourth, don't be afraid to involve authorities if necessary. Financial exploitation isn't just a civil matter, it can be criminal. Adult Protective Services, the police, the district attorney's office, these aren't resources just for other people. They're for anyone being victimized, including you. I was terrified of going to the authorities, terrified of making it official, of crossing a line I couldn't uncross. But that fear was part of the abuse, too. Tom had conditioned me to believe that involving outsiders would be a betrayal, would make me the villain. In reality, involving authorities was the only thing that saved me. And finally, understand that leaving, fighting back, seeking justice, none of these actions make you a bad person, a vindictive person, or someone who's giving up on family. You're not destroying your family by protecting yourself. You're refusing to be destroyed. This is perhaps the hardest lesson I learned. I'd been raised to believe that family unity was paramount, that you sacrificed anything to keep the family together. But family unity built on one person's total subjugation isn't unity at all. It's tyranny. The shame I felt about needing to stay in a shelter, about being that woman whose marriage fell apart publicly, about needing lawyers and restraining orders and court intervention. That shame was misplaced. The shame belongs to the people who exploit trust, who abuse power, who treat their partners like assets to be managed or obstacles to be removed. If you're reading this and recognizing yourself in my story, please hear me. You deserve better. You deserve to wake up without dread. You deserve to make a cup of tea and watch the sunrise without feeling like you're stealing those moments from someone who owns your time. You deserve to exist fully, loudly, unapologetically in your own life. And if you know someone who might be going through this, don't look away. Don't convince yourself it's none of your business or their choice to stay. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do is be persistent in offering help, in asking questions, in being a Mary for someone who desperately needs one. Look for the signs. Is your friend or family member withdrawing from social activities they used to enjoy? Have they lost weight? Do they seem anxious or depressed? Are they making excuses for a partner's behavior? Are they suddenly unable to afford things they used to be able to afford? These are red flags. Don't ignore them. Don't convince yourself you're being nosy or overstepping. Ask direct questions. Offer specific help. Be persistent, because the first time you ask, they'll probably say everything's fine. The second time too. Maybe even the third time. But one day, in a library or a coffee shop or wherever you happen to cross paths, they might be ready to tell the truth. And when they are, be ready to listen, to believe them, to help them find resources. Be ready to be their Mary. Thank you for staying with me through this whole story. I know it's not an easy one to hear, and I'm grateful you've listened. I'd love to know, what city are you in right now? What time is it where you are? Leave a comment and let me know. If this story resonates